Pro Group Management, workers' comp that works for you.
Welcome to Nevada Newsmakers. On the broadcast today, Jeremy Aguero joins us. He's the head of Applied Analysis, here for the whole show on an all-new Nevada Newsmakers.
Hello, is this D&D Roofing?
Yes, it is. How may I help you?
You did such a great job on my roof. May I speak to the owner?
I am an owner.
Oh, can I speak to your supervisor?
Sure.
How may I help you?
I love your work. May I speak to the owner?
I am an owner. We're all owners. Well, that's why at D&D we work so hard to keep your home safe and sound.
Oh, no wonder.
D&D Roofing and Sheet Metal. Local, employee-owned, here for you.
Like a traditional handmade basket, retail is woven into the fabric of life in Nevada. From big box to mom and pop, retail supports our communities in countless ways. Jobs for the disabled, team uniforms for kids, help for the elderly, and so much more. Retail employs over 1 in 10 workers. Retail supports Nevada, and we support retail.
RANNV.org.
Pro Group Management is the place where companies can find workers' comp solutions that are designed to meet their specific business requirements. As regulations evolve, Pro Group takes a proactive approach to clear the path to make sure your business stays ahead of the curve. Knowing your workers' comp program is optimized, you can focus on other important matters related to your growing business. Pro Group Management, workers' comp that works for you.
Safety is the #1 priority for the trucking industry. Over $7 billion a year is spent on technology like this electronic eye that will apply the brakes automatically. But the most important factor for safety is the truck driver. These hardworking men and women who safely move over 70% of our nation's freight and 94% of Nevada's. We thank you because trucks move America forward.
This is Nevada Newsmakers with host Sam Shad, a no-holds-barred political forum. Now, from the Nevada Newsmakers broadcast headquarters, here is Sam Shad.
And back on Nevada Newsmakers, coming to you from Las Vegas. We are absolutely delighted to welcome back to the program Jeremy Aguero. He is the head of Applied Analysis, and he's one of the top economists in the country, let alone Nevada. It is absolutely a pleasure to have you back on the program.
Well, thanks for the kind words. I'm absolutely honored to be here.
Well, thank you. So let's start out, because we are in the strangest economic times. The government has said that, along with the Fed, that they will support the economy in whatever way is necessary, that the mistakes back in 2008 were that the Fed did not put enough money into the system, did not help the economy, and so this time they were going to make sure there was plenty of money. And it was interesting to hear people who would normally be very fiscally conservative, as well as those who would say normally put money in, they were all agreeing that with interest rates at or near zero, that was not an issue, and also that you were never really going to pay back the main debt. You were only going to be paying the interest. How do you feel about that at this point in time?
Look, Sam, I'm never going to be comfortable with either governments or households spending beyond their means. And right now, the United States debt and the amount that we're spending is the highest level we've ever seen. And that's a problem. Do I believe that stimulus was necessary? I absolutely do. $5.3 trillion was pumped into our economy. And so much of that ended up in disposable income of individual households. Now, much of that money was used to pay rent or to put food on the table, keep the lights turned on, all of those type of things. But what we've seen is that it's extended way beyond that. And right now, it's really bolstering our economy as it's coming back online. I am worried about it because eventually the bill is going to come due. And yes, interest rates are low. And yes, the rate that we're all bearing for that is relatively modest. But we have seen personal incomes, disposable incomes, increase 6 years worth of growth during a period that we were in a pandemic, in a recession. Well, that is unheard of. And so now there's all this enthusiasm about the economy. Everything's coming back. People are spending money. Retailers are seeing it. Tourism industry is seeing it. And all of that is great. And I don't want to minimize any of that. but that stimulus is going to come to an end, and the bill is eventually going to come due. And how our economy transitions to a heavily stimulus-influenced economy to an economy where that stimulus is no longer available is something we're going to have to keep a very close eye on starting late third quarter, early fourth quarter of this year.
All right, so let's throw in a few things into the mix here. Almost 2 years ago, I interviewed Senator Reid, and Senator Reid, at that point, before all this extraordinary stimulus of this go-around, because we're not even counting what happened in 2008, said we're at the tipping point for debt, and that this is not going to be sustainable. Our children and grandchildren are going to pay for this. I've been hearing that phrase my entire adult life. When is the point where we actually see the price of paying for this, and how does that manifest itself?
Well, when that happens, Sam, I wish I could tell you. I really do.
Because we could both make a lot of money.
Well, I think we both make a lot of money, but I think we could also avoid a lot of heartache for our country if we knew when that tipping point was going to happen. Look, the United States dollar remains remarkably strong. And as long as that's the case, as long as we're seeing the inflow of other capital, then I'm not overly worried about it. Do I believe it's irresponsible? Yes. Do I think we have to get it under control? Of course I do. During a pandemic is not the time to be worrying about that. I think Keynesian economics at its most basic is that when things are bad, you spend money. When things are good, you put that money away, just like all of our households should be doing. But we're not seeing the second half of that. We never get to the point where we're reducing that debt, and that is the fundamental problem. And I believe that's probably what the senator was ultimately talking about, is that we allow it to grow and grow and grow, but we never take the steps to start to reel it back overall. There's a lot of theories out there. We'll devalue the United States dollar, pay off that debt with a devalued dollar, that our economy will grow. Obviously, President Trump had a strategy to try and grow the economy tremendously, and essentially that would give us more flexibility in terms of public capital coming in that would allow us to reduce some of that debt. Some of that worked, some of it didn't. But what we do know is that right now we are spending more money than we are generating as a country, and that in and of itself is unsustainable. And I can't tell you whether it's at 130% or 150% or 200% of GDP, but what I can tell you is that if we look at other major nations that have seen that type of run-up, it has uniformly led to problems. Now, in the most immediate issue, what we're seeing right now is, of course, concerns over inflation, right? The information came out just today that inflation numbers were rising. I'm also not overly concerned about near-term inflation. Yes, we're going to have some inflationary conditions, but our economy is so much different than it was when we had stagflation and some of these other things during the Carter administration.
All right, so let's go back to the last time that we were actually in a position to pay down the debt, and that would have been at the end of the Clinton administration, correct?
That's right.
And in fact, I remember talking to an economist back then who told me that we were actually to the point of where we could pay off, a portion, if not all, of the national debt if we had continued down that path, and what a remarkable thing it would be for the country. That's how far back it's been since we were in a position to pay back debt. When you talk about the inflation, and this is what concerns me about our current media environment, is that people pick up on things within the media and it becomes a whirlwind, and the average person doesn't really understand what is being talked about. And economics, if I'm not incorrect here, in a lot of ways depends on how people feel about the economy as to what they do with their money, as to whether they save it or invest it or spend it. And obviously, with all this money that we're awash in because of all this economic stimulus, there's going to be inflation because we have not been able to produce all the goods that are necessary to be able to fulfill the needs of the population, correct?
Sam, that's absolutely right. I mean, there's nothing you just said that I disagree with. There's one
that, by the way, scares me.
Well, there's
no,
one
I'm kidding.
element
I'm
I'd
kidding.
like to add
Yes.
to that, and that is, when I was a kid, right, my grandma and I used to love to play Scrabble, right? And we play all the time. Now I do the same thing with my kids, but we play Words with Friends on our little iPads, right? When I bought that Scrabble game, it was subject to retail sales and use tax, right? It was a good that was produced. There's only so many Scrabble games that the company can produce. But today, Words with Friends, all they do is produce it, and as many people that can access it through their phone or their iPad or through their computer can play. We spend so much more of our money on services today than we do on goods today, that the effects of inflation, because of the supply side considerations of how much we can produce, are more limited today. We are much better in terms of our ability to ramp up production today than we have ever been in global history, and we see that all the time. In addition to that, technology has reduced the cost of any number of the things that you and I purchase. We see it in things like televisions all the time. Even things like in the medical sector, we've seen prices come down in some areas where people expected them to come back up. My only point here is that, yes, we're seeing some of those things where there are finite amount of that supply. We're seeing it in lumber, in the home building industry. We're seeing it in some of the food when people go to grocery stores. We expect a short-term issue where that inflation does push it upward. But over the longer term, when we look at how the United States has ramped up stimulus, put money into the economy, we've had periods, not as extreme as this, but we've had periods similar to this, where we just haven't seen those inflationary pressures. When everybody's going back to work, when people have a lot of disposable income, we're not seeing those prices ratchet up. As a matter of fact, in many areas, we actually see prices come back down. Remember, it wasn't that long ago, we were talking about deflation in our economy. So, do I expect it to be a problem? Yes, in the near term, I think it's something we're going to keep an eye on. But longer term, I think the structural changes in our economy between 10 years ago, 20 years ago, or 50 years ago will actually be something that'll help us not experience that type of hyperinflation we had when so much of what we spent our money on was something that had to be produced in a factory.
And the Fed also has tools to be able to deal with inflation. So, but they've not even gotten, well, I mean, in the last month, they were above the target that the Fed had, but the Fed had a target of 2%. And it had been years and they had not reached that target. So, I mean, they were actually encouraging inflation for a long time, not in the way that is being described in the news media, which is, oh my God, it's inflation, but just in saying this is a normal growth pattern for an economy, is to have a certain minimal amount of inflation that is good for the economy.
Sam, without a doubt. And let me just add one more thing to that as well. The Fed also has better access to information than it's ever had before. We can see inflation. We can see where the run-up in prices are taking place. We get real-time information that didn't exist 20 or 30 years ago. The Fed's ability to act and react is better today than at any point in any of our lifetimes. And from that perspective, not only do they have more tools in their toolbox, but their ability to utilize those tools is phenomenal.
Are you concerned in some areas, as in construction, for example, that there is price gouging? Because that's what I'm hearing from people in the contracting businesses, that the cost of lumber, the cost of steel, that these are not because of shortages, but they're just because it's a supply and demand issue.
Yeah, I don't think those two things are mutually exclusive, Sam. I think, yes, there's some price gouging going on, but I also think that there's a reality in terms of there are supply limitations that are actually out there in some core commodities that are necessary. But I don't think it's just in those core commodities. I think we're also starting to see price inflation in terms of labor as well. Oh, and the combination of all those things is going to be a problem for some industries. So you asked if I was concerned. I very much am.
All right, so let's come back to that when we come back after the break. We'll be right back.
Because of UMC, I'm putting my free time to good use.
Because of UMC, she keeps me on my toes.
Because of UMC and this guy, I'm here.
UMC, the highest level of care in Nevada.
Can't do it. Stupid, like my mom.
We can't do anything at Mommy's because you won't pay child support.
Dad said you cheated, and he's not even sure he's my dad.
Mommy said you left both of us, so she isn't gonna let me see you. I look just like my father.
I'm divorce attorney Marilyn York, and I may represent men, but hate has no gender, only casualties. Please, stop sacrificing your children in your war against your ex.
The signs and symptoms of cataracts can start out small with subtle changes in your vision. So don't wait. Be proactive and take your vision into your own hands. If you're experiencing the onset of cataracts or just have questions, contact your eye care professional or call Eye Care Associates of Nevada today. Dr. Hiss has years of experience specializing in the surgical correction of eye disorders and has completed over 84,000 vision correcting procedures. At Eye Care Associates of Nevada, we'll change the way you look at the world.
Dad? Are you learning? This place is great.
Huh?
You gotta try this.
Wow, this stuff is great. People are gonna love it.
Yes. Yes, they will.
This is Nevada Newsmakers.
And back on Nevada Newsmakers, we continue our conversation with economist Jeremy Aguero. So work inflation, or at least wage inflation. We are in a very extraordinary time right now. The other side of my business beyond doing a talk show is running an advertising agency, and I have lots of clients who are just in a complete panic because they cannot find people to employ. And I'm afraid I don't care what the administration says. It is the $300 extra money per week that is being given that is one of the reasons why people are not out there going back to work. And it seems to me, State Senator James Settlemyre said on the program that perhaps the federal government should change it from an added to unemployment, but instead it should be an incentive to go back to work. You would get the $300 a week if you were going back to work. What's your thoughts on that?
Look, I don't think there's any doubt about it. I think we are paying people to stay home. And when they're confronted with the cost of going back to work, what they'll earn, I suppose I should say, when they go back to work versus what they can get by staying at home, they're likely to do that. And let's be clear, not only did we give them an unprecedented amount of unemployment insurance benefits, but we also, for many people, said, you know, the requirement to pay your rent is also set aside. And so that's a lot of freed up disposable income for those households. But I do want to be clear about this because I don't think it's the only reason that people are staying home, Sam. For whatever reason, there is still this undercurrent of concern about COVID-19. And I think a lot of people, more than I would have expected, are very concerned about the vaccine, are very concerned about getting sick, are very concerned about having a family member, either a grandparent or a child, getting sick. And I don't think we can necessarily minimize that. I think there is a real, legitimate fear among some folks in terms of going back to work. In addition to that, I think that there's also been transitional effects that have occurred during the COVID-19 crisis. And that is to say that for a number of households, right, they had to make a change because they could no longer have their kid in school. And so one parent had to stay home, or they were doing something along those lines. And it's not like that's something they can sort of change instantly relative to that. And it's a combination of all of these things that is essentially meaning the people we would expect to be in the workforce today are not in the workforce today. And I think that that's going to alleviate itself probably by September. But in the meantime, I'm like you. Every client we have is telling us we cannot find people. And with an elevated unemployment rate, we cannot get people to come back to work.
Do you think the survival rate for some businesses is going to be low because they cannot get the employees? Because I'm talking to people at this point who are telling me that where they would normally have 20 people doing a job, they only have 5 people doing a job. You saw Lotus of Siam announce a couple of days ago, one of the best Thai restaurants in Las Vegas, if not the country, is shutting down one of its locations because it cannot get enough employees in. You're going to see companies fail because they don't have employees.
Yeah, we're not going to, we are, Sam. Where you mentioned Lotus of Siam, they're not the only example that's out there. Businesses are not expanding, they're not making investment decisions, they're not able to meet customer expectations because they can't get those employment levels. And I mean, how terrible is that? Here we are trying to recover as an economy, and what's actually keeping us from recovering is what we did in terms of stimulus to make sure everybody was okay during the economic downturn. I don't know exactly what the right answer is to resolve that, and I do believe it will resolve itself in the next couple of months, but it's not something that we have to worry about. It could happen. We're already seeing it happen.
It also seems as though you know, and in politics, we both know that to turn the ship around, anything to do with politics takes forever. For example, we never should have seen the stimulus money going out to everybody in the country, but government has no way to be able to figure out who actually needs the stimulus and who doesn't need the $1,400 or $2,000 or what it might be, and so they have to send it to everybody. And so that creates a certain kind of chaos there. But isn't there a form of social engineering going on at the same time from the federal government? in our economy?
Yeah, look, Sam, I don't know I necessarily agree with the premise of the question. I mean, I think that the federal government certainly had the tools, if it wanted to provide stimulus checks to people who were unemployed.
How quickly, though? Oh, well, yeah.
You know, I mean, I think you could identify fairly quickly and easily the number of people that were displaced.
Hang on, look at Dieter.
Yeah.
I mean, Dieter in Nevada, now, admittedly, their computer systems were screwed up, but, you know, there are IRS offices all across the country that still have paperwork in boxes.
Yeah, Sam, I'm with you.
To an extent.
A year's a long time, right? By the time, maybe the first stimulus, I would have agreed with you. Okay, I get that. By the time you get to the second and the third, I think their systems could have been put in place to have much better information relative to who was employed and who wasn't. But, you know, we can argue that point and go back and forth. But, you know, at the end of the day, right, the idea was we had to build a bridge. We had to get to the other side of the COVID-19 pandemic. And honestly, without that stimulus, I don't know what it would have been like to get there. I do agree with the premise that you know, the risk was not putting enough stimulus into the economy in order to prop it up throughout that period. Now, here we are on the other side of that, and there's some unintended consequences, and we're going to deal with that. But man, the momentum that we're seeing in our economy, nationally and here in Nevada, is pretty strong. And I think these impacts, these effects that we're seeing are going to be relatively short-lived.
Well, and I agree with you. You know, I think that it will smooth itself out, but it's going to be a pretty bumpy ride for a lot of companies. And it's a dichotomy of where you have a boom at the same time you have all these roadblocks to accomplishing that boom. Let's take another break. We'll come back. We'll have another area of topic I want to talk to you about. We'll be right back.
Enjoy exceptional value and a comfortable atmosphere at the all-new Nevada Steak at Tamarack Casino. Great food, fine wines, and delectable desserts.
Ooh, your good times at Tamarack.
Dimitri Prine here for Design Outdoor. Come visit Design Outdoor's store and backyard to see our wide selection of fire pits, barbecues, and pizza ovens, natural stone water features and fountains, and frost-proof pottery. Our store and backyard are located at 11600 South Virginia, just north of DeMonte Ranch Parkway. Visit designoutdoor.com or call us at 851-9499.
One of the most psychologically damaging things parents can do to children in divorce is disparage one another, which is why I can't believe I even have to make this commercial. Half of your kids' genetics come from this person you're spewing hate about. Your children have the right to love you both, but more than that, they deserve to love themselves.
Marilyn York might be a men's rights divorce attorney, but this is for every selfish parent. Shut up!
Enjoy exceptional value and a comfortable atmosphere at the all-new Nevada Steak at Tamarack Casino. Great food, fine wines, and delectable desserts.
Times at Tamarack.
This is Nevada Newsmakers.
And back on Nevada Newsmakers, we have the noted economist Jeremy Aguero here with Applied Analysis. So to me, and you tell me if I'm wrong here, the group that are getting really screwed in all of this and have been for a long time are seniors, people on a fixed income who had saved their whole lives for retirement, and now their money is sitting in interest-bearing accounts that are producing less than 1%.
Yeah. Look, first of all, I agree with you. My heart goes out to many of those seniors that are on a fixed income and have actually seen that fixed income erode over time. I mean, it's terrible. You know, the other side, Sam, I think the other group that I put into that same category are young people, very young people, because they're being saddled with all of this debt that, you know, we will probably be paying back as a nation throughout their lifetimes as opposed to yours and mine. You know, we've had a strategy in this country for the better part of the past, really almost 2 decades now, to shift and pivot over to favoring people who borrow money as opposed to people who lend money, right? We keep these interest rates remarkably low, but, you know, our financial system is sort of predicated on a balance between those two things, and the government is coming in and is simply manipulating that system somewhat. restabilizing that, getting back to a sustainable equilibrium in terms of how our system works, I think is going to be a little tricky. You know, we had the Great Recession, and now we've had COVID-19. We were not, you know, we were still had some lingering effects from that Great Recession in our financial system that we're still dealing with a little bit. And I think as that sort of manifests, it's going to be a little tricky.
Would a comfort zone for interest rates be around 6%? That somebody could make 5% on their money
right now. That feels a little high.
Well, I don't mean right now. I'm just saying, if you were looking long term, that somebody could get 5% in a net return on putting money in the bank, rather than being in. Because one of the things that's scary to me for a lot of the population, young and old, is that they're in the stock market, which is, let's face it, a casino. And so, you know, even though we love casinos here in Nevada, we don't want people putting their life savings in there. And you got about 20 seconds on this.
No, look, I don't know what to tell you other than you're right. Do I believe that those interest rates on interest-bearing accounts need to go up? Do I believe fixed? Yes. Can I tell you it's exactly 6%? No, but I can tell you it's a lot higher than what it is today. And what we do want is that people that are fiscally responsible are able to take advantage of that, and they're not hurt for those financially responsible choices.
And boy, is that not the real answer right there, which is people who are fiscally responsible are getting hurt.
Yes, sir.
That's where we got to leave it. Jeremy Aguero, thank you so much for doing this. I always appreciate your time.
Oh man, it's absolutely my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
You're very welcome, and we'll be right back. Brian Culpa Photography was born in the rolling hills of Massachusetts, and now he can help you experience the stunning beauty of Nevada in a whole new way through the power of flight. Flying has always been a passion for Brian, and at Brian Culpa Photography, he can make your imagination soar. Brian has the creative mind and tools to tell your unique story. Experience the bird's eye view at brianculpaphotography.com. As you know, Reno is booming. Toll's Development Company is helping it grow with insightful design and development, building community with every project, adding beauty, adding excitement, emphasizing our shared humanity. Reno is becoming bigger. Toll's Development is helping it become better, more livable, more enjoyable. To learn more, go to tollsdevelopment.com. tollsdevelopment.com.
Safety. We all think about it. You think about it when he buckles in, when you check your mirrors and put away your phone. RTC thinks about safety too. In fact, we create it. Center turn lanes mean fewer blind spots. Bike lanes keep cyclists and you safe. Roundabouts reduce injury collisions, and all these crosswalks are designed to keep families like yours safe. Safety is your priority, and it's ours too. Every day, in everything we do.
Pro Group Management specializes in providing industries with the necessary components to satisfy and exceed workers' comp requirements. Every business has unique needs and specific regulations. Pro Group Management stays ahead of the curve, providing up-to-date services to keep your industry in top form. Discover how we simplify your tasks, improve efficiency, and reduce expense to keep you moving in a positive direction. Pro Group Management. Workers' comp that works for you.
Don't forget, another way of watching Nevada Newsmakers is to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Nevada Newsmakers on YouTube. We'll see you on the next broadcast.